looking back at it, I don't exactly know how I did anything but read this month. Hello, my name is Shelby. Welcome back to my channel, Grace with Books. Today I am doing my July wrap-up. I had an absolutely insane reading month. I actually do not know how I can top it. Mostly this is thanks to participating in the reading rush, which really made me step up my game. But right now I'm super excited to share that I read 9 books this month. I read 2 contemporaries and 7 fantasy books, but you know, who's surprised? Basically today I'm giving you my final thoughts on these books, my ratings, and yeah, so let's just get started because there's a large pile of books next to me that I'd like to get through. I have my reading journal here for references in case I need them. I record everything in my reading journal. It is how I survive in my bookish journey. So let's get started with my first book. The first book that I read this month was Godsgrave, and this was my 5-star read of the month. For those who do not know, Godsgrave is the second book in the Nevernight Chronicles by Jay Kristoff. They tell the story of this assassin named Mia Corvair as she seeks revenge and training for her assassin ways at the school Our Blessed Lady of Murder to become a better assassin and essentially kill those who did her wrong. I'm not gonna lie, when I first started this book, I did not think I was going to like it. Jay Kristoff's writing style is very unique, and I really enjoyed that in the previous book. But it was really weird formatting at the beginning for this one. Some things were italicized, some things were not italicized, and eventually I learned that that meant one was I just shook my camera. Eventually I learned that that meant that the italicized were taking place in the past and the non-italicized were taking place in the present. But that was still really confusing for me because there was no markers. It was really hard to keep track of the 2 timelines, and it was just overall like making my head hurt. So I was like, I don't think I'm going to enjoy this book as much as I did Nevernight. But once the plot really started to pick up and we really got to see Mia at this gladiator training school in the second book, I thought it was so good. He just has such a way with words, and the narration style and the characters and the twists made my heart soar. For me, yes, I look a lot at writing style, grammar, story flow, but most of what I base my ratings on is emotion. By the end of this book, I was in tears. I needed the next book. I was so happy with how the book turned out, even though it's a dark book. So I gave it 5 stars because of that reaction, because of that emotional journey that I had throughout this book. And that's why I rated it so highly despite my doubts at the beginning. So yeah, that was my first book. The second book I read this month was also a continuation of a series, and that would be Thunderhead by Neal Shusterman. I think this was really the first book that I seriously annotated with my new method. Thunderhead, as I said before, is also a sequel in a series. The first book is called Scythe by Neal Shusterman, which is probably one of my favorite books so far this year. Scythe tells the story of this futuristic utopia where we have all but eliminated death. So in order to keep the population under control, society has appointed scythes, or who are basically the ones who kill, and they have to kill a certain amount of people a week in order to keep the population down. They have to do it fairly. There's a lot of things in place. I want to say this book took place about 6 months after the last book ended, and it was really interesting to see our characters, Citra, or now Scythe Anastasia, and Rowan, and what they've been up to those 6 months and sort of the new normal in this utopia. It was also really interesting to see the perspective of the Thunderhead, which is basically like Google on crack in this society. It was interesting to see this sentient AI's thoughts throughout this entire program. For once, it's interesting and sort of nice to read about a all-knowing computer not being evil. I'm looking at you, Aiden. And I really just enjoyed that perspective, and I really enjoyed seeing how much this world has grown. For the first book, we were very focused in on our characters and developing the plot, and this book, we sort of got to see the entire society and the world and how it works in the future. So I gave this book 4 stars. It did not get 5 stars because I did feel like a lot of things were unexplained or unnecessary. I'm not going to say them because they are pretty major plot points, but it was just a lot of description and then like a teeny bit of action. The third book that I read this month and that I also gave 5 stars is Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. I actually did a book talk on this book because I was very passionate about it, and I will link that down below and up above, so be sure to check out my thoughts on that. So I'll give you a nice little abbreviated summary. I loved Sorcery of Thorns. It was so imaginative and creative. I got it in my June Fairy loot box, and honestly, it just made my heart so warm. Sorcery of Thorns is about a girl who was basically raised by a library. She was surrounded by books and librarians her entire life, but these aren't just normal books. These are grimoires, books that are spelled with magic. It's her job and her duty and her desire to protect her library, and when she gets accused of this crime, she has to go prove her innocence and protect the place that she loves. It was so good. This is a standalone fantasy novel, so yes, things pick up very quickly because you don't have a whole series to drag them out. I loved her writing. I loved the characters and the storyline, and it was all so deep and had so much depth to it for such a, not short, but for a standalone book. So yes, 5 stars for Sorcery of Thorns. And look at the pretty edges. Now we are getting into my reading rush books. I read 7 books for the reading rush. One of them was a reread. I read Harry Potter for the first time in years, but since it was a reread, I've decided to not share my thoughts on it. I really just want to share my thoughts on books that I've read for the first time now. So let's start. The first book that I read, and this was for the prompt, I believe, a book that I meant to read last year, was Empire of Storms by Sarah J Maas. I really did intend to read this last year. I've been so slow with this series, and I think it's because things keep popping up and they've sort of been on my back burner because I know eventually I'll get to it. But this was so put on my back burner that it took me 7 months into this year to finally read it, and now I have, and it was amazing and well worth the wait. Yes, I did need to look on like the Throne of Glass like .fandom website to get a little summary of the previous books before starting this one, but I caught up and I was so happy with it. I ordered Kingdom of Ash. Actually, it's right there on my bookshelf staring at me, waiting for me to read it. I'll get to you soon. But I really enjoyed it. I thought it was an interesting book. I thought the characters were well drawn out. As I said before, it's much easier to add depth and layers to books which are more drawn out over a series, and I really think in each book we learn something new and more interesting about Aelin and about the entire crew. I did give this book 4 stars, however, and I'm pretty sure that was because sometimes reading it felt like a chore to me. It felt like something I needed to get done, and while like the last section of it was like held onto my attention and I couldn't put it down, the beginning part was very dry to me personally. I don't know. Once it picked up, I really loved it, but the first like couple of chapters I was really struggling to get through, and I think that's why I ended up giving it 4 stars, which doesn't mean I didn't love the book or the plot any less. It just means it was a little difficult for me to get through, and in my opinion was not worthy of my 5-star rating. Okay, this book that I read was an author's debut novel, and it's The Crown's Game by Evelyn Skye. I gave this book 4.5 stars. I loved it. When I first started reading it, it really to me resembled Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. It has that same sort of trope of 2 magicians with mentors pitted against each other, not in a real battle, but sort of in a more whimsical challenge. I thought it was interesting that it was set in Russia, but not like a fantastical Russia. It was set in like Russia. That doesn't make any sense, but it was set in a place where the people don't know magic exists. It could take place like now and we wouldn't know magic exists. But this takes place during the, I believe, the Romanov Empire, and these 2 magicians are competing to be the Imperial Enchanter and sort of get that place of respect. The ending shocked me. I have so many notes on it. I absolutely loved it. There were so many twists and turns. There was so much anticipation and such. I wasn't expecting it to be a funny book, but I laughed out loud at multiple parts. It was so witty, and I cannot wait to read The Crown's Fate. So I gave it 4.5 stars. Okay, we're moving on. It's a long time, like, oof, but we're getting there, Okay. The next book I read was also 4 stars, and it's that's the back of the book. To Kill a Kingdom by Alexandra Christo, which I did not realize it was a Little Mermaid retelling until I was well into the book. I read this book for read a book with a non-human main character, and of course Lyra is not human, she's a siren. This book gripped me immediately. I mean, like, when you have a first line that's I have a heart for every year I've been alive, it just makes you want to keep reading and like, oh, okay then. The retelling is about a siren named Lyra, who's sort of princess, and she kills princes. She is known as the Princess Bane, I believe. And when she accidentally kills one of her own people, her mother banishes her to the surface as a human and commands that she takes the heart of this one prince. So she has to keep this secret that she is actually a siren from this prince who hunts sirens, and it's funny and it's witty and it's so interesting and lovely. I first heard of this book actually through Fairy Loot for their Broody Banter box. It said this was one of the items featured from this book, so I guess I should have been expecting it to be really funny and, you know, banterish, but I wasn't, and it was such a welcoming surprise because at points this book is dark and gory, and then you just have like a sarcastic joke or comment out of nowhere and it's like and then like, oh god, no, not again. So like that turnaround and to be able to accomplish that successfully was just such a good thing for this book. So I really enjoyed it. Wasn't anything like over the top special, but I had a fun time reading it, so I gave it 4 stars. The next book I read was My Crazy Sick Love by Drica Pinotti, and this book was actually sent to me by the publisher to read and review. It tells the story of Amanda, who is a hypochondriac living in New York, and it's about her dealing with her own anxieties and sickness while also falling in love. I personally have generalized anxiety disorder. I suffer from panic attacks and just horrible bouts of anxiety sickness, and so reading this book was very, very personal to me. I don't have hypochondria, but the symptoms and sort of what she did is what I do. I sort of close myself off from the world. I don't often ask for help, and for a long time I didn't seek treatment as well. Watching Amanda's journey through this book as she figures out that she actually has something that she needs help for, and learning to accept help from the people who love you and the people around you, and then eventually becoming independent and being able to do that yourself was just such an amazing thing to read about. I really was touched by this book. However, I did give it 3.5 stars. And I know you're like, why would you give it 3.5 stars? You were just raving about it. But as much as I loved her emotional journey, I could have done without all of the medical jargon that I did not understand. Like, I found myself skimming pages like one after the other because they were talking about some sickness or another, and that part did not relate to me. So, but I really did love reading about her falling in love and sort of balancing that with her own internal struggles. I am by no means saying don't read this book. I gave it 3.5 stars. I'm saying if this is something that you think you can relate to or you want to learn more about, this is a fantastic book for you. For me personally, it was the sick part I didn't love, but everything else was just so meaningful to me as a person and as someone who struggles on a daily basis. So I gave My Crazy Sick Love 3.5 stars. The second contemporary book and the 8th book I read this month was Prince Charming by Rachel Hawkins. Oh my god, I loved this book. I gave it 4.5 stars, so you can see that I loved this book. I try to be a contemporary reader. I definitely read more contemporaries in the summer. I'm a seasonal reader in that way, and I adored this book. I had actually never really heard of it, but I had heard of the sequel in the series, Her Royal Highness. So when I saw this book by like the same author and like similar cover art, I was like, I'll pick that up, and I read the back and I fell in love, and it was just so happy and exciting and lovely to read. It tells the story of Daisy Winters, whose sister is marrying the Prince of Scotland, so therefore she is sort of like pulled in to this royal madness and dealing with her not being good enough for that kind of lifestyle and sort of being behind her sister in this spotlight, and I was so touched by it. I put like my love tab in there a lot, red, not just because of like the romance is in the book, but also because of the sisterly love in this book. These are two sisters who don't see eye to eye on a lot of stuff. Daisy's older sister is more refined and elegant, and Daisy herself is a little more wild and doesn't have herself figured out. But watching them come together and watching their sisterly bond strengthen and grow throughout the course of this novel was just so touching to me as an oldest sister. So I really, really loved that. It was so funny. It came at such a good point in my reading rush experience as well. I've been reading a lot of dark fantasies, so to read this light, airy contemporary was so much fun for me. So yes, 4.5 stars for Prince Charming. As you can see, like, you're starting to see my pile go up because I've been putting them behind me, and there's a lot of books there because, yeah. My last book this month was Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. This is a book that I had been so highly anticipating. I don't know why my book is all messed up, but I also gave this 5 stars. I don't know why I said less than that. But this was also 5 stars. I adored this book. Laini Taylor, I really loved Daughter of Smoke and Bone. I actually listened to the audiobook on that because I had tried reading it a few times and I found it very difficult. So I was a little worried about the writing style of Strange the Dreamer, but I actually really enjoyed it. I loved the dual perspective between Laszlo and Sarai, and I just loved the overall story as a whole and how imaginative and wonderful it was. This book is just so hopeful and full of light that it made me smile all the time and was just so captivated from the beginning. I cannot wait to read Muse of Nightmares. I hope I find it in the same UK cover scene because I don't want to have like mismatching covers, but you know, if I can't help that, we'll see. But it was such a big book. It was probably one of my biggest books of the reading rush. I finished it in 2 days, which was just like, but I had so much fun reading this book and I was captivated the whole time. Like, between reading, I would look up fan art and be like, oh. But yeah, so that was just such a special last read for me. And that was my July wrap up. I'm gonna tell you all not to expect this many books being read in August. I just don't think I have as much time. School's starting at the end, so I'm very focused on that. But I am so proud of what I accomplished this month. And that's that. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, like, subscribe, comment, tell your friends, don't tell your friends, it's up to you. I'd also like to make a quick announcement. I've been accepted as a representative for WikiWiki Candle Co. They had these beautiful scented bookish candles. I'll leave the link below, as well as my code, which is GRACE20 if you want 20% off your purchase. I have a rep package coming, so I'm super excited to unbox that for you when it comes. And I think that's all that I have today. I hope you guys have an amazing, wonderful, positive day. Don't forget to keep reading and keep spreading your own personal light and joy. I'll see you guys next time. Bye!